Okay, good evening, everybody. We're going to get started. I see some of the regulars haven't come, but they'll be arriving. And there's plenty of food here. Tonight is July 29th, 2019. It's a Dine and Learn in Kayla Marine Park, the third of the season, the fourth of the season, sponsored by the Halimi family. L'zecher nishmas her grandmother, Shamsi Bat Azizi. The neshama should have an aliyah. So we're talking about the Halachah that came from Poland in the 1500s and the 1600s, the golden age of Spain, the golden age of Poland. And past 2 weeks we've discussed a lot about the Rema and the Maharshal, and I think it's time to go down another generation. The Maharshal, as we said, was the Gadol Hador, had a big yeshiva, and he was an old school kind of pshat-oriented teacher. He had many students. While the Rama in Krakow, he came from the school of Lublin, where they were very into pilpul, all sorts of exciting contradictions in the Gemara, trying to resolve them. But the Rama, of course, as we all know, as he's famous for, was master of Halachah first and foremost. And even though the Maharshal, as we saw last week, was an older contemporary cousin, really, of the Rama, they did have some overlapping students. And I'd like to focus on one overlapping student who had some interesting things to say about his relationship to the two of them. This particular student, his name is Rav Binyamin Slonik. Probably doesn't mean much to most of us. His sefer that he wrote was the sefer Masas Binyamin, his collection of tshuvas, which again does not mean that much to the contemporary, but in his day it was a groundbreaking, very, very important sefer. And people, if you've heard of it because the Shach and the Taz and the Magen Avram quote him, take him very seriously, and debate him. And some halachas, well, actually, Mr. Shamsi went tonight, was decided by him. It wasn't clear beforehand, but now it's clear once he addressed it. So one issue he talks about, this came up, Michael's not here. This came up a few months ago. Michael had, his daughter was watching a rabbit that belonged to a friend of hers on Shabbos, and he was asking me, so he is Sephardic, it's very relevant, and the rabbit got out of the cage for whatever reason, and they wanted to know whether they're allowed to put the rabbit back in the cage. So on the one hand, there's a muksa question, which we're not going to address tonight. The other question is, the malacha, one of the lamites malachos is seda, trapping an animal. Are you allowed to trap the rabbit? You put it in the cage and you close the door, you lock it, that's trapping an animal. That's literally trapping an animal. Are you allowed to do that? But it's not like this rabbit is roaming the wild. He's in the house. He can't get out of the house. He is trapped. You're trapping an animal that is already trapped. You're just trapping it more. Are you allowed to do that? So the Mishnah on Shabbos, at the very beginning of the 14th chapter, Shemona Shratzim, so it says, Chaya ve'of shebir, an animal or bird that's in your property, meaning you already have it trapped to some degree. Could be you have a mansion and the bird is flying around the mansion. Hatzadon potter, if you trap it, it's potter. Ve'hachovel behen, and if you injure it, if you draw blood from it, chayav. That is a biblical violation. Chayav min haTorah. So it sounds like if it's birshuso, it's already trapped, it's in your house, and you want to trap it even more by getting it into that cage, you nudge it with your leg, and you push it into that cage, and then you close the door. That is pater. Okay, what does pater mean? That's the next question. Not so easy, not so simple. The Hagos Maimonios brings two opinions on that. But before we go there, let's go. So this is talking about on Shabbos. Now the Mishnah Nam Beitza talks about what to do on Yontiv. On Yontiv, Ein Sadin, it's one of the four prakim is of Beitza. Ein Sadin, Dagi Minam Bibrim Be Yontiv. You cannot trap fish. You can't go fishing on Yontiv. You're allowed to cook. You're allowed to prepare food. Why can't you fish? Because you could fish before. So why are you waiting till the last minute? Cooking is always fresher. But trapping an animal you could have done before Yontiv. You fish, when you catch it, it tastes better when it's fresh. Yeah, but you could capture fish and keep them alive. Keep them in your bathtub. And then on Yom Tov, you kill it and you cook it and you have fresh fish. So therefore trapping is not allowed. Fishing is not allowed on Yom Tov. So it talks about the Gemara on this. Mishnah goes on to talk about other types of animals, including animals that you let them roam free. So in our houses, you might have a domesticated pet. You might have a dog or a cat, fine. But if you go back just one generation, my mother, she grew up with animals walking in and out of her house. She grew up in Israel, and they had a backyard, as she likes to say, the animals are treated better than the kids, because that's, if you wanted to eat, you needed to have fatted animals. So these animals were coming in, and they were valuable. We're not talking about a big cow. Nobody lets a big cow into their house. But a goose, a duck, a chicken, chickens go in and out. If you live in that kind of community, in that kind of society, the chickens go in and out of the house. Are you ever allowed to close the door if a chicken happens to be inside? If you close the door, you trap the chicken inside the house. So the Gemara talks about animals that come back at night. I mean, and the idea is effectively they're already trapped. They're trained, they're coming back. If you trap them, that's not an additional trapping. So the Gemara uses this phrase to describe, Amar Shmuel, Kol she'omer, whoever says, Have mitsuda v'nitzudeno, let's bring a trap, bring a net to capture it, and we'll trap it, that is asur. But if you don't need it to trap, so the way we say nowadays, if you could just reach out and pick it, and the animal's not going to struggle at all, it's not going to jump out of your hands, it's going to happily go into your arms, so that's already trapped, and there's nothing wrong with trapping it even more. It's on Yom Tov. What about on Shabbos? So Shabbos we had the Mishnah that says Hatzadon Pater, and on Yom Tov the Gemara in Beitza seems to say that it's allowed. So the Hagos Maimonios has two opinions. One opinion is that Pater means you're exempt, so it's allowed. You're allowed to do it. The other is that, what do we know about Shabbos? The Mishnayos in Shabbos, it says at the very beginning of the Masechta, on Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. Pater on Shabbos means Pater aval asur. It means you're not allowed to do it, it's just not deraisa. It's not a biblical prohibition, it's a rabbinic prohibition. Pater aval asur midirabanan. So if it says capturing it is Pater, it means you're not allowed to do it. So two opinions. So the Beis Yosef paskins that it's mutter, it's allowed. He paskins like the first opinion that in the Gos Maimonios that it's allowed. You're allowed to capture an animal that's already captured, which meant Michael, who's Sephardic, could follow the Shulchan Aruch, and he could put the carrying muktzah as a separate issue, but he could nudge the rabbit back into the cage. Ashkenazim, it gets a little more complicated. So the Maharshal, we're talking about Poland, right? So the Maharshal, who was not a fan of the Shulchan Aruch, he lived at the same time, the time that it was published. He already had decided he had his own views of the Halachah, and he didn't need the Beis Yosef and the Shulchan Aruch telling him what the Halachah was. So the Maharshal says, he quotes the Smag, who says Pater is asur, so you're not allowed to trap the bunny rabbit. But he quotes the Rosh in Beitza, who says you're allowed to. And so Marshal says, why should Shabbos be any different from Yom Tov? If the Rosh permits it on Yom Tov, it must be permitted on Shabbos. Therefore, we have the Rosh, and we have that opinion that goes Maimonios, so he passes it's mutter. You're allowed to. You're allowed to trap that animal. Which, again, I said is very common in those societies. We had the chicken walking in and out. The Rema disagrees, the Rema is machmir. He says, no, you're not allowed to. So this very question was asked to the Masas ben Yamin, who was a Talmud of the Rama and the Maharshal, and he had to decide which of his Rebbeim does he paskin like. So in the tshuva itself is very interesting because he quotes the Maharshal as his Rebbe. He says, my Rebbe, the Maharshal, has a tshuva on it. And he says, I think my Rebbe's wrong on this. He says, the Rosh was talking about Yom Tov, and Yom Tov is different than Shabbos. And from the fact that the Rosh said it's mutter on Yom Tov, you can deduce he holds it's asur on Shabbos. Otherwise, he would have said it's mutter on Yom Tov and Shabbos. So therefore, he reads the Rosh exactly the opposite of the Maharshal. And then he quotes other Rishonim, and he says there's a majority who hold it's asur, and the Ramah paskins that way as well. He doesn't say my Rebbe the Ramah. Elsewhere he says my Rebbe the Ramah. We'll see in a minute, Mr. Hashem, where he says that. Here he just says the Ramah is also machmir. Therefore, says in Masas ben Yamin, you're not allowed to trap an animal that struggles on Shabbos. So with Michael, so number one, he was Sephardic. So what I told him on the fly was he's Sephardic, so it's okay. He doesn't have to worry about it. But if he was Ashkenazic, it would be a problem. But later, I realized I was wrong because this bunny rabbit doesn't struggle at all. So the Ashkenazim are machmir when you have to trap it, when you have to run after it, when you have to chase after it. A bunny rabbit, at least this kind of bunny rabbit, you don't have to chase after it. It just snuggles and is happy all the time. So a rabbit, even Ashkenaz would be allowed to close the door close the door of the cage on the rabbit. But so I saw the following advice given to pet owners by Rabbi Natan Slifkin. He's very into the animals. Zoo rabbi is his own controversy, but setting that aside, he's very into animals. My daughter spent Shabbos when she was in seminary by him, and there are animals apparently everywhere. So his advice is as follows: if you need to open the cage for whatever reason, put in water, clean something, put in a toy, block the entrance, so no matter what, the animal can't escape and run away. Block it with your body, block it with something else, so that even when you open the door, it's already it's still trapped. You can fiddle around in the cage, close it again, all's good. Just an advice, halachah l'maisa, I believe it can be followed. So that's one case of the Masas Binyamin discussing what his Rebbe's held. So there's another case which I think is even more interesting, but much more complicated. So there's a siman in Even HaEzer, which is probably the hardest siman in all of Shulchan Aruch. It's Even HaEzer Yud Zayin. It's a siman that talks about an aguna. How are you matir an aguna? Very, very complicated. It all has to do with different kinds of testimony and all sorts of situations. And if you look in the tshuvas of any generation, until probably most recently now that we have the internet and people are asking all sorts of weird questions, the majority of the tough questions by the big poskim are about agunas. Because they always go to the top gedolim of the generation and they struggle with it. And that's the chidushim that they come up with. That's what they say that's really worthwhile for the generations. So in Masas Binyamin, Siman Mem Daled, he was asked about 3 men who disappeared, and it seems that they were killed on the road. And 2 of them had pretty decent testimony, but the third, all they had was a non-Jew who happened to say, "Yeah, I recognize this guy. I remembered him from town, and he was killed. I saw him dead in a ditch." The problem is he recognized him only after 3 days had followed from when he died, and after 3 days, decomposition already starts to set in, and it's very hard to identify people. So on the one hand, he's a non-Jew, and we believe a non-Jew. So when a non-Jew testifies in court, we don't accept that, because I believe the reason is that someone who doesn't accept Torah and mitzvos, you can't rely so much that they might try to trick the system. They'll say, "Look, she's a young lady, she needs to get remarried. They have these rules. These Jews have these rules. I'll make sure she can get remarried." There's some people like that. So if someone is not faithful to Torah and mitzvah, so we don't accept their testimony. But if it's Mesiach Lefitumo, if he happens to say, you don't ask him. You're not allowed to ask him, "Did you see this guy out somewhere dead in a ditch on the road?" You can't ask him. If he happens to say, "I saw this guy dead on a ditch on the road," so then you accept that as testimony. And that was the case here. He said it. It was Mesiach Lefitumo, but he also said it was after 3 days. And that's already a machlokas. Do we accept it? So the Masas Binyamin, he starts off his tshuva. This is a powerful start to a tshuva. So he relays the whole question, which is very hard, and he starts our tshuva. Yira dinishosehen shel elu, the wives of elu gimel anashim, of these 3 men, mutarin lehinase. He starts off with the conclusion they can remarry. Then he goes page after page after page, arguing, going through the technicalities. That's how you do it. These women needed to get remarried. So he paskined immediately, and then he went through the hard part. The problem he had was, okay, so it's a machlokas rishonim. Can we accept this testimony or not? The problem he had is that his Rebbe, the Rema, says we don't accept it. So that's how the Rema paskins in Shulchan Aruch. So this is fascinating. He says it in 4 different places in his tshuvas. He says this. He says, if the Rama had seen this tshuva of Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi, who lived at the same time, and it wasn't published till after the Rama died, the Rama had seen this tshuva of Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi, he would have changed his mind. He would have passed in the other way. Who could say that? I couldn't say that. But he knew the Rema. He personally knew the Rema. He was able to say that. So what did Rav Eliyahu Mizrahi? Rav Eliyahu Mizrahi, if you remember from last year, so he was a Rav of Constantinople, which was the capital of, or Istanbul, which was the capital of the Ottoman Empire. So he was basically the Chacham Bashi, the chief rabbi of the entire Ottoman Empire. Although nobody held him that way. In Turkey, he was the chief rabbi, and certainly in Constantinople. And he was a very, very, very important posek. And nowadays we know him more because of his commentary on Rashi, which is fascinating in itself. So the Rav Eliyahu Mizrahi had the following shaila. A non-Jew saw a corpse of a Jewish man, and he described two unique features, two simonim muvhakim, but he did not recognize the face. So on that, the Rambam and the Smag, it seems they would not accept simonim muvhakim if it does not identify the face. If someone has a deformity or, they had an accident sometime in life, you can recognize certain features of their body. But if you don't recognize the face, it's hard to permit a married woman to marry someone else. It's an Eish Ish, it's one of the 10 Commandments. One of the 10 Commandments. So Eliyahu Mizrahi argues as follows to be Mekel. He says, number one, the Rambam and the Smag are a minority. Number two, later Rishonim who saw it, they knew what the Rambam and the Smag held, and they still disagreed. So we follow Basroi, we follow the later poskim rather than the earlier poskim. And number three, this is a shasad chak. It's an emergency situation, and therefore we can follow even a minority view. So the Masas Ben Yamin says, no. So his case is a shasad chak. This is a relatively young woman, and she needs to be permitted to remarry. Otherwise, she'll be single for the rest of her life, and who knows what will happen. It's a terrible thing. And so his psak was accepted by the Taz, by the Bishmul, as authoritative. But then comes a Chalkas Machokik and says, I don't know what this guy's talking about. Chalkas Machokik says, so this requires, think about this for a minute. Why are we lenient on a shasad chak, an emergency situation? So says the Chalkas Machokik, okay, so Chachamim say one way, and a minority opinion says another way. But they're talking about a normal case, a normal situation. There's no extenuating circumstances, a normal situation. Is a mutter, is an aser. But when extenuating circumstances come into play, even the chachamim who are machmir would say, you know what, in this case, let's be meko. Therefore, shasad chak, everyone agrees it's allowed, and that's why in a shasad chak we're allowed to be meko. But that's if the disagreement is on a normal situation. Here, says the Chalkas Machokik, the whole disagreement is about an aguna. It's about a shasad chak. So now you're going to come and tell us, well, shasad chak, we had to be mekel, but that's what they were machmir and were saying. We know it's a case of shasad chak, and we still have to be machmir. So therefore, says the Chalkas Machokik, there's no room. There's no breathing room here to be mekel on a shasad chak. So the Taz, as I said, the Taz follows this Masas Ben Yamin. So the editor of the Taz. First, I thought it was a Taz.
What would be a case of not shasad chak?
So if let's say someone puts food onto a blech on Shabbos, and normally we wouldn't be allowed to, out of the refrigerator, put it on the blech. Normally we wouldn't be allowed to do it, to eat that food. But it's a bris, and it's for an orphan, and all sorts of other layers on top. It becomes a shasad chak. So we say, you know what? Maybe it could be mekel. There are other opinions to say it's allowed. Rabbi Yosef allows it. So the shasad chak would be mekel.
So any aguna question is a shasad chak?
Generally speaking, I believe so. You could argue. So I was thinking, okay, so that's a young woman. A young woman needs to be remarried. Right. But let's say she's 70, 80 years old. Her husband disappears. We don't know where he is. That's a shasad chak. But could be she's poor, so maybe it would be a shasad. You could possibly find situations, but that doesn't seem to be the normal case of an aguna. So the editor of the Taz, I don't know who the editor is, but whoever the editor is, has a very fiery response to the Chalkas Machokik. He says, number one, it's clear from the wording of Rav Eliyahu Mizrahi that you don't need all three conditions to be mekel. Any one of those three is good. If you have a majority, if you have, what was the other? Later post game. If you have a Shas Chak, any of them are good to be Meko. And number two, so what was the Chelkas Machokes theory about why we are Meko b'Shas Chak? Because the only disagreement is in a normal case. But as Shas Chak, everyone would agree, even the Machmer would agree you should be Meko. So he says that's against the Beferish Gemara. It's against the famous song that we hear nowadays. The Gemara in Brachos and many other places. Kedai Rabbi Shimon Lismoch Alav b'Shas Chak. It's not saying Chachamim also agree are Meko b'Shas Chak. No, they say no. Chachamim hold this. Reb Shimon holds this, but in the Shas Chak, we'll follow Reb Shimon. He's worthy enough. We can follow him. So he said, "What's the Chalkas Machokek thinking? I don't even understand. I don't know. So later, there's a sefer called Osar Poskim of Herzog. So when he became chief rabbi of Israel, it was not long after that came the Holocaust, and came all sorts of really, really tough aguna questions. Rabbi Aaron Rekevet likes to say that if you look at pictures of Herzog before the Holocaust and after, or not even before the Holocaust, before the end of the Holocaust and then a few years after, it looks like he aged 30 years. I mean, Mamish turned all gray and old because of the tsaras that he had, of all these difficult shilos that came on him.
Was he the Posek Ador? There were other Gonim at that time also could have passed him those shilos.
He was as a chief rabbi of Israel and someone who was accepted by everybody. He really was. So they had their own chief rabbi, but they worked together. Right. And he was sort of the senior one. I mean, he used to give a shir in his house on Friday on Yerushalmi for Talmidei Chachamim. So who came to that shir? I'll tell you who came. Because we have the testimony of Rav Yisrael Lau, who was a yeshiva bacher at the time. Right. He also came, he was part of the meeting, so he saw who came. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Rav Elyashiv, a young Rav Elyashiv came to the shir. Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank came to the shir. They came to hear Rav Herzog give shir. He was accepted. He wasn't the only one.
Right.
But also remember, it was right after the Holocaust.
Right. So it's the point there. It sounds like you're saying.
So he instituted something called the Otzer HaPoskim, which is a collection. There was no real collection of all the Achronim, what everybody had to say on Even HaEzer. So he started that project because he said we need to collect all the poskim on Even HaEzer. We have it on Yoredeya, we have it on Orach Chaim. No one did it for Even HaEzer, so they did Osar Poskim. And it's been ongoing, Israel, bureaucracy, government, it was funded by the Rabbanut. It took a long time. It's fantastic. They have a whole volume just on Siman Yud Zayin of Aguna. So in there, I saw this sefer called the Atzei Arazim, who tries to explain the Chelkas Machokek. He says it's all about how does a rabbi decide how to paskin a shiloh. It's all about methodology. How do you choose? How do you know how to choose? So he says the debate here is talking about the Chelkas Machokek, and the Rav Mizrahi is talking about we have two opinions. You don't have a personal view on it. So how do you choose? Do you say, well, on the Deraisa it should be Machmir, and on the Rabbanan it should be Meko? I've seen. There's a very popular author right now, halachic author of Eliezer Melamed in Israel, who puts out this set of svarim called Pninei Halachah, which are wildly popular. They're in the elementary school and the high school curricula, and in many schools in Israel. They're translating them to English. Very, very well done. But one of my problems I have with the Sefer is that very often he puns. And he says, well, they say this, they say that, the Raisa should be Machmir. They say this, they say that, the Rabbanan should be Meko. I think he's too humble. Call it. Make a call. If you don't know, ask a Shaila. Then go to someone higher. But that's the way, is that the way to do it? So with Elio Mizrahi, from this understanding, is saying no. When you're dealing with an issue of Eishasish, adultery, permitting a woman to remarry, it could be adultery. So he's saying in such a case, regarding an aguna, you follow the lenient view. If you have two views which are basically equal, and who do you choose? So you're Meko. They're your Meko. But if there's a majority on one side, you have to follow the majority. And if you have a later Rishon, a Basroi, so you have to follow the Basroi. But if all things equal, with an Aguna, you should be Mekel. So now I'm confused. That actually makes a lot of sense. That's common sense approach to Paskin and Shiloh. So why would anyone disagree with it? Why does a Masas Binyamin have a different view than the Ansei Rozim and the Chalkas Mechokek? Make it a little sharper. So I saw this tshuva of the Masas Binyamin. We were talking before about sometimes he answered a question to the point where that nobody really had to talk about it anymore. And if they ever did, he was a standard bearer. So he was asked the following question: can a blind man be called to the Torah? So if he's davening here on Shabbos often enough, he'll know the answer is yes. But in those days, it was a very big question. He says the machlokas rishonim, and within this tshuva, he says, here's how you paskin a shiloh. Here's how you do it. Let me tell you a secret. It's almost as if he's giving us the rabbi's toolbox. So he says, if obviously you have to be worthy enough to enter into these kinds of debates. But if you have proofs on one side, you think you have an opinion, prove it. And you can pass in that way. If you don't have any proofs, you don't think you can prove it, then you have to follow a methodology. He says, then you follow the majority. And if you don't have majority, then you follow the later view. That seems to be awfully close to what the Chalkas Mechokek is saying. So why are they disagreeing? So I don't know. I was thinking about this, and I think that what they disagree is as follows. Right? So they agree, if you have an opinion and you can prove it and follow it. Be confident. You look in the Igros Moshe, you rarely see him say, well, the majority say this, or, well, it's Derabanan, we should be Megel, the rest. He doesn't do that. That's actually tshuva not even worth publishing. Who cares about that? The Igros Moshe is Rav Moshe saying, this is what I think it is. The Shach disagrees, I'll tell you why I think the Shach is wrong. Or something like that. And if you can prove it, so then prove it. If you can't, so then in a case of Aguna, so according to the Masas Binyamin, you treat it like a Shas Adchak. And then you follow the lenient view, even if it is a minority. While according to the Chalkas Mechokek, it's not a Shas Adchak. You can't treat it like a Shas Adchak. And therefore, you can only follow the lenient view if it's equal. Everything being equal, then you follow the lenient view on an Aguna. So according to the Chalkas Mechokek, you have an Aguna Shiloh, and you have equal views, so then you can be Mekel. If you have the majority on one side, you don't have the right to shift it. You can't put your thumb on the scales. But the Masas Binyamin says no. An Aguna is a Shas Adchak, and you put your thumb on the scales, and you can be lenient in such a case. So Halachah L'maisa, what do we do in such a case? I have no idea. This is way beyond my pay scale. That's an Osar Poskim kind of question. So I think we're just about out of time. So where we are right now is talking about the history of Halacha and bringing up some interesting shilos from Poland in the 1500s. Yitzhak, next week will be the 9 days, so we'll have a milchik dinner, and we'll also talk about 9 days shilos that came up in Poland in the 16th century, and then that will be the 5th, and then we'll have 3 weeks after that where we'll continue, and we'll have to move a little faster to get to the 17th century. So thank you, and someone's going to say bracha achrona?